In this video, I'm going to show you how to apply finish. The steps that I'll go through you'll find are also listed on this paper, which is posted inside the finishing room. This is a raw piece of wood, while these 4 pieces are stained. You may recognize them from the video I created on key points to staining. If you desire to stain your project, this must be done before applying finish. The first step is to remove all dust and particles from the project using a tack cloth or compressed air. This dust we need to remove is simply dust that may have settled on the board after staining. What you're not removing is any sanding dust, because if you sanded your project, you actually need to re-stain before applying finish. So we're just removing any dust that settled. Next, turn on the ventilation blower. Keep the door closed and put on gloves. The finish that I'm going to use for this demonstration is called Wipe On Poly. I think it's a great finish for students to use because all you have to do is wipe it on. You don't need any brushes or a spray gun. It also helps to eliminate runs or drips. The only downside is that it usually will require more coats to get a good layer of finish. So to begin, you follow the directions on the can and it tells us to give it a good shake. And you also need to do this throughout the process to eliminate any settling to the bottom of the can. First, we need to open the canister. To do so, you want to use an opener, pry it off, and then we simply want to apply a liberal amount to a clean, soft, lint-free cloth and simply rub it into the wood. This finish makes it quite simple. You want to make sure you continue to reapply, keeping the cloth wet. And on these pieces, I'm just doing the surfaces as an example, but obviously you do want to make sure that you cover every surface, end, and edge of a board. Finishing is not just to make it look better, but to protect the project. So we don't want any differences in moisture from one side of the board to the other. So you may find that you're applying finish to your rag just as often as you're applying it to the board. And you want to make sure you're in a good position with a light source so you can see it reflect off. And if needed, you can always check your board afterwards to make sure you see that reflection. Okay, if you find that you have any dry spots, you can touch it up. This also helps you look for drips and runs, but with Wipe On, usually the problem is having too little rather than too much. So, like I said before, usually it requires more coats to build it up. So with this finish, it requires 2 to 3 hours of dry time. Within that time, we don't want our wet surfaces contacting anything. So in the case of a board like this where we want to apply finish to both surfaces and edges and ends, there's no dry spot to set down on the table. And we don't want to wait 2 to 3 hours before we can do the other surface. So if you, again, plan ahead, like I said, with staining, have some boards with nails sticking through, you can apply finish, set it on the nails, then you can apply finish to the edges, ends, and this surface. For something like a leg, again, we can have screws with a hole in the end of the leg. We could put that in first, and then we could apply finish to every side of the leg. Now, after you've waited the 2 to 3 hours of drying time, you're ready to sand. You must sand between coats of finish, or else that coat of finish will just stay a rough surface. We want it to be nice and smooth. So a couple tools for sanding. You can use just 220 grit paper, but I tend to like using a sanding sponge, and you want a fine sanding sponge, but that allows a flat surface, so then you're not creating any waves in your finish, and you don't sand all your finish off in a single spot, which you might with sandpaper like this. You could also wrap this around a block of wood too, but the sponge has a little bit of give, so that's nice. If you have any rounded surfaces or profiles in your piece, you're going to want to use a flexible Scotch-Brite pad like this. Then you're not going to sand off too much finish in one area. Key thing with sanding is do not sand too much, so make sure you take your gloves off so you can feel when it's smooth again. We're only sanding just enough. It only takes about that. Feel it, see if it's smooth. If it is, you're good. Okay, so you repeat that for all pieces. So after you've sanded your surfaces, you're going to have the finished dust on your project. So you do need to use the air hose and blow it off another time before applying your second coat. After removing dust, you're ready to apply your second coat of finish, just like the first. Then you wait your dry time. Then you sand it again, remove the dust, apply your third coat of finish, and you repeat that sequence over and over until you get the thickness of finish that you want. For some high-use areas, you may want to go up to even 6 coats of finish if you're using wipe-on poly. Now after your last coat of finish, you do not want to sand. I repeat, do not sand after your last coat of finish. Simply wait for it to dry. Now before you use it, before you assemble anything, make sure you wait 24 hours. You need more dry time than if you were just going to apply another coat. If you follow these instructions, you're going to turn out with a great project.